Welcome to calm, boring, sleepy history. Tonight we drift backward through time, through the mists of centuries long, fated to explore the world of medieval gynecology. But do not worry, this is not a tale of panic or pain. You are not here to be shocked or disturbed. Instead, you are here to rest, to let your thoughts slow, your breath deepen, and your body soften. As we settle into this quiet journey through the past, you'll find that even the most unsettling subjects like medicine, childbirth, and the strange beliefs that once governed women's health can be approached with stillness and curiosity. Imagine yourself in a stone chamber lit by flickering tallow candles. The scent of rosemary and ash lingers in the air. Outside, a bell tolls the hour in a village you'll never visit in a century that's long since passed. And now let us begin. Imagine waking at dawn, not to the sound of an alarm clock, but to the dull clatter of hooves on the muddy road outside your window. You live in a modest, timber-framed home, the roof thatched with straw, the air inside always just a bit smoky from the hearth. You are a peasant woman, perhaps in 13th century England, or maybe the Italian countryside. The details shift, but the rhythm is constant. Each day begins in the same way. You rise before the sun. Your linen shift sticks to your skin, still damp from the cold. There are no private chambers. Your children stir beside you and someone is already coughing. And there is work to be done, but your body aches. You've given birth 5 times, maybe more. Some of the children survived, some did not. There was no midwife, only your mother-in-law with shaking hands and whispered prayers. She used ash or wine or crushed herbs packed into linen. There was no sterilization, no certainty, only faith and repetition. You prepare a small meal course bread, perhaps boiled barley. You chew, slowly aware of the dull ache in your belly, something that has become familiar, a monthly rhythm or maybe a persistent soreness. No one calls it an infection. There are no names for what lingers inside a woman's body. There is only discomfort and endurance. And so you move through the day. You carry water from the well-heavy clay jugs pressing into your hips. You scrub garments by hand until your fingers bleed. You knead dough and stir porridge and mend torn wool by firelight. And always your body is watched. By the church, by the village, by your husband. A woman's health and her obedience are not separate things. If you complain of pain, a neighbor may suggest a poultice of pigeon dung and wine. Another may accuse you of imbalance of coldness in the womb of spiritual impurity. You nod politely. You listen. But the truth is, there is no real help. There is no doctor not for women like you. Just whispers, superstitions, and the endless need to keep moving. When you menstruate, you are told to remain distant. Some say your blood could rot crops, spoil food, sicken infants. You feel unclean even when you try to wash clothes are rinsed and secret hung to dry in hidden places. You do not speak of it. You are taught to be silent. And then, if you are pregnant, it begins again. The fear, the waiting. No one knows why some women die and others survive. They say it is God's will, or that your baby is breached because you were disrespectful to the priest. There is a charm you can wear, a relic to hold between your teeth during labor. Sometimes it works, sometimes you simply disappear. As evening falls, you rest your weary limbs beside the hearth. The fire is low, your body hums with exhaustion and memory. You close your eyes to the sound of distant wolves. Perhaps they howl because a birth went wrong nearby, or because they too live by ancient rhythms. This was the rhythm of medieval womanhood, a rhythm of endurance, of mystery, of quiet suffering that was never named, only accepted. Let us linger in this silence for a while, and when you're ready, well, move gently into the next part of our journey. Now let us leave the smoky cottages and quiet hardships of the common woman and turn our attention to someone most unusual for her time, a name that still floats gently across the pages of old medical texts. Trotula of Salerno. Trotula was not a peasant. She lived during the 11th or 12th century in the Italian coastal city of Salerno, and unlike so many women of her day, she was educated, respected, perhaps even revered. She is remembered, though not always clearly, as a healer, a teacher, and perhaps the first woman to write extensively about the female body. We cannot say for certain what she looked like, but we can imagine robes of fine wool, perhaps, and dark hair bound in linen, her fingers stained with herbs and ink, the scent of sage and parchment trailing behind her as she moved through the halls of the Scuola Medica Salernitana, the most advanced medical school in Europe at the time. Salerno was a place where Greek, Arab, Latin, and Jewish traditions met not with war, but with curiosity, and in this atmosphere of cautious openness, Trotula studied, she taught, and she wrote her works collectively known as the Trotula became among the most influential texts on women's medicine in medieval Europe. They were filled with strange, sometimes startling advice, but they were also filled with care, with quiet attention to the suffering that other physicians, mostly men, chose to ignore. She wrote of childbirth and how to ease it, of menstruation and how to regulate it, of fertility and barrenness. She described the anatomy of the womb with words that were gentle, clinical, and at times speculative, for she did not have the luxury of dissection or modern tools. She worked by observation, by testimony, and by faith in the natural world. Trotula's remedies were often herbal: chamomile to soothe the belly, pennyroyal to encourage bleeding, fennel wine, rosewater, crushed pearls, and even powdered emeralds all made appearances in her prescriptions. Some of these treatments may have offered comfort, others less so. But through them all, one truth rang clear. Trotula believed that women's suffering mattered. She was bold enough to suggest that male physicians often misunderstood women's ailments or ignored them altogether. In one passage, she gently chides male doctors for assuming that women exaggerate pain. She writes that pain in the womb is real, that menstruation is not a disorder, and that childbirth requires not just prayer, but preparation. For centuries, her work was copied, cited, and debated. Over time, some scribes began to doubt that she was a real woman at all. They masculinized her name, some attributed her work to male doctors entirely, but the voice that remains clear and steady across the pages is one that speaks with a distinctly feminine calm. It is a voice that sees women as patients, not just vessels, that seeks understanding rather than obedience. Imagine her now sitting at a long wooden desk, perhaps near a garden courtyard, the sun low in the sky, her hand steady dipping a quill into dark ink. She is writing for the woman in pain, for the girl newly bleeding, for the mother afraid of the night. Trotula, whoever she truly was, offers us a rare window into the minds of medieval women, who dared to ask why things were the way they were, who dared to offer answers, even if those answers were imperfect, wrapped in the limited knowledge of the age. As we step quietly away from her study, let us remember that not all progress is loud. Some comes in the form of parchment powder and patience. And now, as night continues to deepen around us, let us follow the thread of curiosity into The next chamber of this long, wandering tale, we will now turn to mystery, to cultural beliefs, and to the many strange rituals that surrounded the medieval female body. As we move gently through the centuries, the landscape of understanding shifts not always forward. In medieval Europe, the female body was not just a subject of medicine. It was also a vessel for mystery, wrapped in layers of superstition, religious doctrine, and ancient philosophy. The womb was seen not only as a place of life, but of potential danger. Let us begin with the humors. Imagine yourself as a learned monk or a scholar poring over the texts of Galen, Hippocrates, and Aristotle. These ancient thinkers believed that the human body was governed by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health was a matter of balance, and illness a sign of discord. In this view, women were thought to be colder and wetter than men. These were not insults, merely explanations. Coldness made them more nurturing, more passive. Wetness made them more prone to emotion, and in the eyes of some, to spiritual weakness. Because of this imbalance, menstruation was considered essential. It was the body's way of releasing excess humors. If a woman did not bleed regularly, it was believed those fluids could build up, leading to hysteria, suffocation of the womb, or madness. One remedy for this: marriage and sexual intercourse. For it was thought that a woman's body needed male heat to correct its natural chill. The womb itself, called the matrix, was a place of fascination. Some believed it could wander through the body, dislodging itself and drifting toward the throat, causing choking, palpitations, and anxiety. This was known as the wandering womb, and it was not seen as metaphor. It was accepted as truth. To treat it, physicians might recommend fragrant fumigations, sweet-smelling herbs held near the lower body to lure the womb back down, or foul odors placed near the nose to repel it from the chest. Warm baths, music, or even gentle massage might also be prescribed. There was no sense of invasion here, just coaxing a gentle, if misguided, persuasion of the body back into harmony. Beyond the medical, there were beliefs that bordered on the magical. Some women wore amulets to ease menstrual pain. Others drank mixtures of wine and crushed insects to hasten birth. There were charms whispered over bellies swollen with child, and prayers carved into wax tablets, buried beneath the floorboards. In some regions, a menstruating woman was forbidden from touching crops lest they wither. She could not bake bread lest the dough refuse to rise, nor could she approach the altar. Her body was seen as powerful, yes, but unpredictably so. Childbirth itself was a sacred danger. It was both divine and deadly. Women in labor were sometimes read the Psalms aloud to shield them from demons believed to prey on the vulnerable. The room might be sealed with holy symbols. If complications arose, it was said that a sin had not been confessed or that the child was cursed, and so medicine bled into morality. The line between the physical and the spiritual was thin. Even contraceptives, yes, they existed, were laced with secrecy. Recipes survived that suggest the use of rue myrrh and pennyroyal, but to use them openly was to risk accusations of sorcery. A woman who controlled her womb was a woman who defied nature and perhaps divine order. The midwives who attended these births, who brewed these potions, walked a delicate path, respected by their neighbors, feared by the authorities. They carried knowledge passed from mother to daughter, often undocumented. Yet they were also the first to be accused when things went wrong. If a baby died or a woman bled too long, it was not fate. It was witchcraft. And so gynecology in the Middle Ages was not only about the body, it was about control, about beliefs too old to question. About silence and survival, let us pause here for a moment. Let the weight of these beliefs settle around us, not as judgment, but as understanding. These were not foolish people. They were simply working with the tools they had, and often with more care than we might expect. The female body was mysterious, misunderstood, but always central to life, and thus wrapped in caution, reverence, and fear. Now let us leave behind the damp thatched cottages and smoky hearths and ascend into the hushed corridors of castles and manor halls. Here the floors are laid with polished stone. The beds are draped in wool and velvet. The air is scented faintly with lavender and beeswax. But even here, among tapestries and Tudors, women's health remained a subject more of concern than true understanding. For noble women, the body was not merely personal, it was political. Imagine yourself as a lady of status, perhaps in 14th century France or Castile. You wear layers of embroidered silk, a coif pinned tightly around your hair. You are married most likely as a teenager, and from the moment your household celebrates your first monthly bleeding, your value begins to be measured by your ability to produce heirs. Your body becomes a point of focus for your husband, your family, and your realm. Doctors are summoned not only to heal, but to ensure fertility. Midwives are brought into service and sometimes sent away if they cannot deliver, and all the while your opinions may not be consulted. If you fail to conceive, the fault is presumed to be yours. Remedies are offered, both strange and costly. You may be bled, purged, or given elixirs made of animal fat and saffron. You may be advised to avoid cold air or to pray more devoutly. Some physicians might apply poultices of honey and herbs to your abdomen. Others recommend nightly rituals involving incense and chants. None of this is done cruelly, but it is rarely effective. If you do conceive, the pressure intensifies. You are now a vessel of dynastic hope. The child within you is not merely a child. It is a possible heir, a pawn, a future bride or king. And yet the risk remains as grave as ever. Even among the elite, childbirth remains perilous. Bleeding, fever, stillbirth, these shadows do not care for lineage. To protect yourself, you might wear a relic, a saint's bone on a necklace. You may be anointed by priests or secluded in a quiet chamber for weeks before and after birth. These practices vary from region to region, but the fear is the same. In some courts, female physicians were tolerated if discreet Jewish or Arabic women trained in healing arts might be consulted in secret. But most often it was the male physician, learned in Latin, cloaked in layers of status, who made the final pronouncements. His tools were few, his remedies inherited from older texts, and his manner often detached. Still, some noble women found quiet ways to seek agency. They copied herbal manuals into their prayer books. They funded monastic hospitals. They recorded their symptoms in private letters, describing often in poetic language the swell of their bellies, the burn of fevers, the rhythms of their bleeding. These writings give us subtle glimpses of their interior lives. Yet even at court, menstruation remained cloaked in silence. A queen might retreat for days at a time, citing headaches or fatigue. Her linens, washed carefully by handmaidens, were burned rather than reused. Cleanliness was essential discretion, even more so. And when a noble woman aged beyond her childbearing years, her role shifted once again. She might become a dowager, a patroness, or simply fade into the background. Her body, once so central, became invisible. But invisibility brought peace too. Many older noble women found freedom in this quietness. No longer expected to bear children, they wrote letters. They offered counsel. Some took charge of convents, others retired to country estates, where they tended gardens and collected remedies not for power, but for comfort. It is easy to imagine one now an older lady in a cool stone room. She crushes dried lavender between her fingers. A basket of sage sits nearby. The sun filters through stained glass as she dips her pen in ink, writing a recipe for tea that eases cramps. She knows it may not cure everything, but it helps, and that sometimes is enough. Among the elite, gynecology was not about knowledge alone. It was about tradition, control, and reputation. Yet even within these confines, quiet revolutions unfolded in the spaces where women listened to their bodies even when others did not. And now we return slowly, softly, to where we began. We have wandered through the dim corridors of time, past the flicker of hearth fires down the halls of cloisters, across parchment-lined studies and candlelit birthing rooms. We've heard the rhythms of medieval womanhood, unseen, yet ever present, the subtle weight of expectation, the quiet ache of knowledge half understood, and the simple, steady endurance of daily life. You have met the village mother kneeling by the well with sore hands and weary breath. You have stood beside Trotula of Salerno, her inked fingers writing comfort into ancient scrolls. You've listened to whispers of wandering wounds and amulets pressed to skin. You've sat quietly in the cold chambers of queens, feeling the hush that wraps itself around power and pain alike. And through it all, one truth remains constant. The body was always more than flesh. It was story. It was silence. It was survival. Today we may marvel at the strangeness of old remedies, the rituals, the fears, the fumigations. Yet these practices were born of care, not cruelty, of curiosity, not contempt. They reflect a world that was trying to understand itself with limited tools and boundless mystery. And perhaps that is not so different from today. Good night, gentle listeners.